better your chances is to do your research. And a good way to do that is to visit your local property auction.
In the auction room, you'll be spoilt for choice, but remember, other bidders may want your property too.
The trick is to have a budget and to stick to it. So, what caught the eye of the bidders on today's show? First up, there's a surprise in store in West Bromwich in the West Midlands. Looking around, and... whoa, what was that?
Whilst in Gillingham, Kent, there's plenty of space to play with. Not enough to stable a horse, but quite enough to take a more substantial property. Come on!
And in Telford, Shropshire, it's time for the kids to earn their keep. Does Ella get paid?
We treat her to food at night, yeah. No,
Thanks, Dad.
All these properties have been sold at auction. We'll find out who bought them and what they paid for them when they went under the hammer.
1, 2, 3...
In the show.
We go now to Gillingham in Kent. It was here in July 2013 that I originally looked around this detached two-bedroom bungalow that had a guide price of £190,000 to £200,000. As expected, in this little bungalow, look at this. It needs decorating, it needs attention. There's a big old crack along there, so I'll get that looked at. But on the positive side, what I do love is the fact that I can see into every single room from standing here. It makes it very welcoming, and I do like a nice open hallway. I'd say that's a bedroom. We've got a bathroom, which will need completely updating, a great kitchen, a lovely size. I mean, there is a lot you can do with that. And through here, you've got the sitting room, the lounge area, whatever you like to call it. You could have a dining room, but a lot of work to do, and it's very spacious. I do like it. Yes, it was in need of some real elbow grease, but it had plenty of positives, including a big front garden, perfect for converting into off-road parking. But the real bonus was still to come. Well, out the back is a significant parcel of land, 0.38 acres, in fact. Look, it's huge. Not enough to stable a horse, but quite enough to take a more substantial property. Come on, we're all thinking it. This is a perfect plot for a bigger and better house than this bungalow. Now, you could renovate, you could extend. It's worth thinking about, but knocking this place down and making the most of this plot is more than worth a thought as well. My creative juices were flowing. So were my first thoughts, a straightforward refurbishment of the bungalow, barking up the wrong tree. As with everything in the property game, it always comes down to maths. Say you bought the bungalow for the guide price, around £200,000. You knocked it down, built a 4 or 5 bedroom place, did it nicely, high spec. How much are you going to spend? 200k, maybe more? So you're into a £400,000 project. If you go by the rule that you should spend a third on your land, a third on your build costs, and you walk away with a third as profit, you'd be hoping to sell for £600,000, and I simply can't see a house here making that sort of money. You can pick up a large family home for well under 500 grand on this road, which makes me think maybe this bungalow is worth working with. So a new build or the bungalow on a huge and pleasant plot seemed the right way to go. Do you renovate? Do you demolish? What would you build here? Let's see who had some ideas at the auction.
Really super lot, this one. Detached bungalow on a really large plot, over a third of an acre. Where do you want to start me on this one? 190 would be a good place to start. Start me at 180 then. 180. 180, I'm on the way. I've got you on the left-hand side. 180 and 5. 185. 185. 190 and 5. 195 and 2.
The bids came in fast and furious, with several bidders involved. We rejoined at 244,000.
Coming back again now, you need to do it quickly. 245. 245 I have. 246 is against you on the internet. 246. It's in the room, it's not on the internet bidder, just so that you know. At 245 for the first time, 245 for the second, third and final time. You sure you're all done? Sure, sir, £245,000 in the room.
That successful bid of £245,000 belonged to Joe. He had worked in IT for 25 years before becoming a teacher for 5 years and then deciding on another career change into property developing, in which he already had experience. It was a couple of months after the auction that I met Joe back at the property. Joe, congratulations.
Thank you.
What a fantastic plot. So, what are you going to do here?
When I first looked at the property, I was looking at keeping it as it is and then extending it slightly, renovating it, going upwards and backwards, and then possibly putting something at the back with a side access. We've come up with a few other ideas as well, and one of those is my other half would like to keep it for our own personal residential home as well. She likes the size of the plot. We've got a Doberman and he loved it when he came down after we got the keys and everything. I'm still trying to convince her with a couple of other options, keeping the plot but maybe alternatives at the back at the moment.
So, do you think you'd like to build your own house here, or would you just develop this bungalow?
At the moment I've got somebody drawing up plans to come up with a new build. So knock this down, build a new one on top of this, or just a little bit further back, a larger family home, which would be at least, if not slightly bigger than the one we've got at the moment.
Joe had a budget of no more than £250,000 for the new build, which, along with his paid price of £245,000, already meant a total spend of £495,000, which would have been fine if he went along with his wife Camilla's preferences and lived here. But as a property development proposition, it didn't look good in my book. Demolition costs can really stack up, and a new build can quickly run away with you in terms of budget. So is Joe ignoring the best option sitting right under his nose? Now, the bungalow as it stands is fantastic. It's got lovely wide rooms.
Yes.
You could go up.
Yes.
You could go out just with permitted development and make this a fantastic space. Surely that's the better option for you. And then try and get planning permission to build a separate house in the garden.
It is, and that's another one I'm seriously considering, and I have been considering, and I'm trying to convince my wife that we can still do that and get away with a reasonable sized house. Even if I go back another couple of metres and apply for planning permission, that shouldn't be a problem.
So much of what Joe could do depended on planning permission. Plus, there was a covenant on the legal pack that set restrictions on what could be built. And he needed to sell his current home to release the equity for the work needed here. Whether he would renovate or build, Joe was hoping to have it all done in 6 months. What are you going to be doing in the next few months?
In the next 3 months, it's going to be getting the plans drawn up, submitting the plans, whether it's a complete build or whether it's an extension to this, and hopefully get some agreement with the planners about what we can do at the back, what options there are and what they would be happy with.
Just under a year later, we returned to find that Joe and his team were halfway through renovating the original bungalow into a chalet bungalow. But why a renovation and not a build?
We originally wanted to go with the option of a house, basically extend the bungalow upwards, and also build a couple of properties at the back of the garden. We didn't get that option from the planners, so I decided I would go for a side extension and a chalet bungalow, which is what we eventually got passed by the planners. So we've got about 4 metres to the right-hand side, half a metre or so on the left-hand side, and we knocked down the front because it looked rather ugly to make it a little bit more appealing and give it a wider hallway and an entrance area.
So the planning department unfortunately scuppered Joe's plan to build a house on the site. But what, I hear you cry, is the difference between a house and a chalet bungalow? Well, a house, traditionally speaking, has 2 stories and possibly attic space, whereas a chalet bungalow is 1.5 stories and likely to have a roof that comes down to the first floor level.
It will have upstairs 4 double bedrooms. A master bedroom will be larger, 2 ensuite rooms, ensuite bathrooms, 1 main bathroom upstairs. Then downstairs there will be 3 reception rooms, 1 large and 2 double rooms, and a large kitchen and a garage.
Joe is nearly a year on from when we first met him. Delays with planning issues and having to find a new architect meant Joe's original 6-month timescale had gone completely out of the window. But finally, things were moving on.
We're now into our 9th week. So we've made pretty good progress considering the fact that we've only had 2 months at it. We've spent approximately $45,000. It's about $25,000 on materials and probably around $20,000 in terms of labour costs. So it's just a basic split, and we still have quite a bit to spend.
Yep, back in June 2014, Joe had a long list of jobs ahead before the house was complete. And what's more, he still wasn't sure whether he'd be selling it or he and his wife Camilla would be moving in.
Well, my wife still says yes, but what I said to her, what we would do is we'd put both our property and this one up for sale at a price that we'd like. And if somebody buys either one of those 2 at the price, then we'll go on that basis. So if somebody offers me the right price for this, then I probably will sell, although I'd like to move into it because I think it's got a lot more potential. We'll see what happens.
Well, we'll find out exactly what did happen when we return later in the programme.
Those later in the show. Well, we've already seen how one of our projects ended up, but what about the other 2?
Are our owners all happy? Did they make the right decisions? Let's find out. Time to return now to Gillingham in Kent, where in 2013 I first saw this bungalow. Though needing a good modernisation, the rooms were spacious, and the guide of 190 to 200,000 was even more tempting when accounting for the large plot of land it was on, which was 0.38 acres. Was it worth building an entirely new house?
Say you bought the bungalow for the guide price, around £200,000. You knocked it down, built a 4 or 5 bedroom place. How much are you going to spend? 200k? You can pick up a large family home for well under 500 grand on this road, which makes me think maybe this bungalow is worth working with.
So it had potential, but also limitations. It was bought at auction for $245,000 by Joe, who hadn't quite decided what he wanted to do.
I was looking at keeping it as it is and then extending it slightly, renovating it, going upwards and backwards, and we've come up with a few other ideas as well. And one of those is my other half would like to keep it.
She wants to live here.
She fell in love with it. She likes the size of the plot.
He had a budget of no more than $250,000 and a timescale of 6 months. However, when we returned almost a year later, it seemed like work had only just begun.
We originally wanted to go with the option of a house, basically extend the bungalow upwards, and also build a couple of properties at the back of the garden. We didn't get that option from the planners, so I decided I would go for a chalet bungalow, which is what we eventually got passed by the planners. So we've made pretty good progress, considering the fact that we've only had 2 months at it.
Sorting planning issues along with some other unforeseen problems had seen Joe's 6-month timescale go out the window. He'd spent £45,000 and he still hadn't decided whether or not he was going to sell or move in himself. But at least work was underway. 6 months later, and 18 months since Joe first began the project, we're back. Joe's chalet bungalow is now finished, with 3 reception rooms downstairs, along with a beautiful high-spec kitchen. Joe's upstairs is actually classed as a loft conversion, keeping the property designated as a bungalow. It has 4 spacious bedrooms, 2 being en suite, and a family bathroom, all of which have modern, clean lines. So no sign of that tired old bungalow at all. And remember, this was a renovation of the original. But oh dear, in there hangs a tale of woe.
As we started working on the inside and started to knock through some of the doorways and windows, that turned into a bit more of a nightmare because the brickwork just came apart once we took the plaster and the render off, which meant basically we had to start rebuilding those walls in the same locations that we'd put in for planning. So it ended up with all of the walls basically being new. The timber flooring was meant to remain in the original house. When we looked at it, it was infested with woodworms, so we had to take all that out and the floorboards, which ended up having to basically redo the whole house, flooring and walls and the roof as well.
Yes, it seems like even the parts of the original bungalow that Joe wanted to keep have let him down and have had to be replaced anyway. On the positive side, replacing everything has meant the house has a beautiful finish. But now the bungalow is completed, what about that land at the back?
The intention is still to make use of the large garden at the back to try and see if we can put something else on there, possibly one detached, possibly 2 semi-detached bungalows at the back.
Joe found out that in order for planning to approve any new development at the rear of his garden, it would need to be accessible by land that's currently owned by his neighbour.
I will try and see if I can approach the one neighbour at the back and see whether there's any possible option of buying access through there. Otherwise, I'm going to be, basically sticking with the garden as it is.
Well, that's certainly something that can be sorted at a later date. But Joe still hasn't told me if he and his wife Camilla have decided to move in.
I wasn't completely convinced whether we were going to move in or whether we were going to sell. And it was my wife who carried on convincing me that she would like to move into it rather than sell it. So she chose a lot of the units for the kitchen and the doors and things like that. If she wasn't happy, then I couldn't put them in.
Well, it seems Joe set out to buy an investment, but has bought a home instead. However, his original budget was $250,000, but that was for a bigger property with a double garage, and it's credit to Joe that despite those unforeseen building issues, he was able to keep the budget for his revised plans down to $160,000. Add that to his original purchase price of $245,000, and he's invested a total of £405,000. What do 2 local estate agents think about what Joe has achieved here?
There's a lot of bungalows up this road, there's some houses, but it's got a nice look to it from the front. It doesn't cause any friction, it's got a good curb appeal. It's different, but it's nice.
The overall, when considering what it was and what it is now, basically is no comparison. It might have been easier if they'd been able to knock it down and start again, but now they've got a really, really nice property.
Both of the estate agents said the property could rent for up to £1,750 per calendar month. Now it doesn't sound as if Camilla will let him sell, but just for the nosiness, let's find out if he could make a profit on his £405,000 investment.
Overall, I'd say the valuation of this property is in the region of £500,000, might even push to £525,000.
If I was selling this property, I would sell it between £580,000 and £600,000.
Wow. That topmost figure would give Joe a pre-tax profit of £195,000. But this is to be Joe's home now. And of course, there's still potential for a development at the back of his garden. So I doubt he could be persuaded to sell. Could he?
I would certainly be more than happy to sell at that sort of price. But having said that, I don't think my wife would be swayed by that too much at the moment.